Välkommen allesammans! Smudging, the ritual burning of sacred herbs used for spiritual cleansing, blessing, warding off bad spirits, known mainly from the Native American tradition, but similar things for the same purposes have been done all over the world with smoke from burned herbs. But what was the view of this in the Norse world? Did the Vikings do it? If so, how and why, and with what herbs? Because I see a lot of people, kind of the neo-pagans, using these smudging practices, and there's not really much evidence that it was done in the historical Norse religion. But in this video, we are going over the little evidence and clues we have that shows that it might have been done something similar, and how we can incorporate this into our tradition if we're trying to be historically accurate. So we're going to have to get a little bit broader on the sources in this video. Instead of only using the Norse sources, we'll have to use the Germanic sources, namely the ones from like Germany, Saxony, Anglo-Saxon, England, Frankish, and so on. These are all Germanic peoples. I know the Celts did something like this too, and the Slavs did something like smudging, but we're just speaking about the Germanic parts of Europe now because we were all part of the same religion, at least the closest amount back in time, and had the same gods and the same practices about 2,000 years ago. But in reality, this is one of those things, like, yeah, of course, Norse and Germanic peoples practiced something like smudging. Every primitive culture practiced something like this. It's like drums or dances or hallucinogenic herbal substances, things like that. Yeah, sure, we don't have any records of those things and how they were used in the Norse world, but of course they had them. Every culture in the world had traditions of these things at some point. Smudging is no different, but there is definitely some Northern European, characteristics that make it quite unique and different from the Native American traditional smudging. So first, it's worth noting that we have just a couple art inscriptions on stones from the Middle Ages. Here is one of a few women looking like they are smudging a newborn baby, passing it over a goblet of fire and blessing it with herbs. This one is from Anglo-Saxon England in the 1000s, I believe. And this actually bears a big resemblance to an account in Håkon the Good saga in the late 900s, where during the major pagan sacrifice at Yule, the drinks were passed over the goblet of fire and the kettle while they drank to the gods and swore oaths. Now, at the time of this image, it's just shortly after the year 1000, and Anglo-Saxon England was not pagan anymore by any means at this time, and it even looks like this is the Queen or something, and she would have definitely been Christian at this time. But this is definitely not a Christian thing they are doing. These things can be traced back much before Christianity came into the north of Europe, and England, contrary to popular belief, they did not hate pagans all that much in England. They kept alive a lot of their pagan traditions, and even in the court of the king, they still did these types of things, and even among some of the most renowned healers in the country, whereas in other countries, the ruling bodies were much more strict at stamping out everything pagan, as I will show you in just a minute. But first, another source from Anglo-Saxon England, the Lacnunga, a medicinal healer book. They call them leech book. This is from the 900s, and it gives the remedy numerous times for lighting herbs on fire and passing the smoke around. It's mostly used for sick livestock, but one of them could be used on humans as a treatment for hemorrhoids. This leech book, again, is from a time when England was Christian, but just about every healing method in this book we think can be traced back to pagan times, and it's not that long before it was written, including a prayer actually to the pagan god Odin in this very book. So there you go. Official Christian times and sources from that time does not always equal Christian origin. Another one is Bald's Leech Book from an even earlier time in Anglo-Saxon England, and that has a couple examples of smoking used for healing too. Now, on the other hand, in what is modern-day France, but would be back then Francia, we have some sources of this being done by the pagan healer women. In the 400s, at the time of Caesarius, this was a time where the Franks and also the Burgundians in the area, which were Germanic tribes, both of them, that settled there, and a lot of them still pagan. But of course, there was a new movement coming around. Christianity spread by Caesarius. He was one of the main ones that helped it, and they were basically saying that they should do away with every pagan practice. He even called them witches who used herbal and natural remedies for healing. These should all be banned. And smudging or something like that, it's translated as fumigation, but I don't know the translation. I don't speak Old Frankish or Latin, so I can't say. But fumigation, they would carry around smoking herbs in the house to purify it. But in France, they actually tried to do a very strong job at stamping out everything pagan, whereas in Anglo-Saxon England, they kept a lot of these herbal pagan remedies that were used before. So that was still tolerated there, but in France we have a source here saying that it's definitely pagan and they should not be doing it. And yeah, by the way, whenever I say smudging in this video, it's not like the traditional Native American smudging. A lot of the time they would have taken the whole branch or ground herbs and lit fire to it. We have no evidence that it was actually bundled up and tied together like the Native American smudge sticks, but whatever, it's the same effect. You get it. So those are some of the oldest sources we have of something resembling smudging in the Germanic world, but let's speak about some of the ones a bit further on in time. We have Walpurgisnacht. That actually just passed last week. It goes from the 30th of April into the 1st of May. It's also known as the Labor Day holiday, and it's a huge party in most of Northern and even Eastern Europe too, but the biggest celebrations are in Germany. This is my favorite time of year. When I was in Germany, that was some amazing parties, and so this has always been a big festival, even up until today, but this has origin into 9th century Francia. I don't even have to tell you guys, you know it already. It's called after the Frankish saint Walpurga, but this was a pagan high festival before that the Christians couldn't get the pagans to stop celebrating, so they just changed the name of it a little bit and made it celebrating a saint instead of whatever pagan god it would be called. And the Celtic Beltane would have been one of the names for it originally at the exact same time, but it would have been a bit different with different pagan traditions overall. But still, this, like 1st of May in our modern calendar, all kinds of traditions associated with this high festival, but one tradition that they all have in common in the north of Europe is lighting bonfires to ward off evil spirits or witches in some sources, and they had certain herbs thrown in there. Again, it's not using smudge sticks like the Native Americans, but it's still burning herbs and letting the smoke spread for the same purpose. Another, you all know it as Midsommar, but in Scandinavia we call it Sankt Hansaften, or it's St. John's Eve, you already know. A pagan midsummer celebration originally, but Christianized later on, and they gave it the title of a saint. And same thing here, we see bonfires lit to ward off evil spirits. Herbs were collected on this day when they were in peak season. Some of it was thrown into the bonfire to smoke while they danced around it and even jumped over the fire. And the rest of the herbs were brought home and dried to keep for the rest of the year to ward off illness and evil spirits and things like that. Mugwort and St. John's wort were actually the ones used most in the Scandinavian tradition, but all over Europe they had a history of lighting herbs and throwing it in this bonfire at the Midsummer Festival. Mugwort, by the way, is in the same family as sage, which is what the Native Americans usually use for their smudging, and in European tradition, mugwort wards off the bad spirits among many other things, just like sage does in the Native American tradition. So yeah, some people have accused modern Norse or European pagans of cultural appropriation by practicing smudging, and you can see that it is something native to Europe too. But as Europeans who follow our native religion, if we want to be a bit more historically accurate, maybe instead of using smudge sticks the way Native Americans do, in our practice we could just light the branches and walk around the area to purify and dismiss the bad spirits, or carry like a goblet and put the herbs in there and burn it like incense and take it around the house, or best would be to light a bonfire, throw the herbs in there, dance around it, jump over that, although that would probably only be used for the high festivals, but that would be the native European way of smudging. But as I mentioned, it's something native to pretty much every culture in the world. Just a couple examples. I know you know the Native American smudging already, done in the North and South Americas, usually with sage in the North bundled up in sticks. But in South America, they use different herbs, things in the rainforest and things like that. Another one, before in history, some tribes in Indonesia, they maybe still do today, but they used to gather all kinds of herbs and burn them and sprinkle them over sick people to drive away evil spirits and disease. Another one, the Aboriginal tribes of Australia. This one is probably actually the most similar to the Native American smudging, but the Aboriginal tribes of Australia, whenever a foreign tribe was visiting another tribe, they were required to bring with them burning and smoking bark or sticks to purify the area around them. We see these types of requirements, especially from strangers visiting a tribe or village, because these people, the strangers, may be more likely to carry with them bad spirits or energy. In the Bengal part of India in the old times, all guests that were about to visit the Khan had to pass between two fires and smoke, and they had to, the gifts that they brought the Khan would be passed through the smoke too, to rid everything visiting of evil or bad spirits or potential magic. So it actually doesn't even seem like burning herbs for the smoke is even necessary, actually. Just a simple fire will do the trick to ward off bad spirits. I mean, look at the old Hindu or Vedic fire bath. All they do is they take a fire and they kind of wipe it around people just on the outside of them, and that's supposed to purify them and clean their aura and all those types of things. So it probably can be done, purifying the area and warding off bad spirits, just with a fire, actually. It's just that certain herbs, like mugwort, St. John's wort, sage, have a tradition of it having a lot stronger effect. So that's how you do it. That's the sources of it being done in the Germanic and Norse world, and the way we can do it if we want to practice this according to what our tradition would have been. So let me know if you guys tried any. I definitely love to do it, and we'll be doing it at the Midsummer, and yeah, we'll speak about that then, and I might even make a video about all that live when I do it. So that's all I have to say. Hope you enjoyed. Vi ses nästa gång.